Hello and welcome to this episode of Kitchen Pedagogy, where I want to focus on the idea about modelling and how sometimes it's difficult to get the ideas across to every student while you're doing the modelling. Some of the teachers I work with have had this challenge where they conceive of this idea of modelling being a good thing, which it is. I need to show my students what to do. For example, with writing, I need to show them how to construct the sentences, how to formulate a paragraph, how to make that convey the right kind of meaning for that audience, be it persuasive writing or analytical writing or whatever it is. And they want to show them what it looks like, because how can the students know what to do if they haven't seen it being done? And the teacher's doing all the right things. They're modelling their thinking. They're doing the sort of metacognitive narration. For example, they might say, well, let's have a look at the question. What's the question asking? This is what I know about that topic. This is what I want to say. And then they say, well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a paragraph that makes a sort of broad statement. And now they're talking it all through. So how do I begin the first sentence? And they're doing all this sort of metacognitive narration, and the students are seeing it appear on the screen. So why don't they all then learn how to do that themselves? Well, there are a number of things I've observed which can sometimes get in the way of successful transfer. One of them is when the teacher has thought that the most useful thing the students can do is kind of get a good copy down in their book, because they then will have that model sort of permanently as a record, and that seems like a sensible thing to do. So you think, while I'm modelling, everybody, I want you to just write it down, and they have this idea that by writing it down, the students are kind of thinking. But what I found is that often they just aren't thinking. In fact, what happens is that they're just spending the whole time, because they have to sort of look up, they're seeing the teacher's written some more, and they're writing it down, and they're trying to get it neatly. And all they're thinking is about getting it down neatly in my book. And they're not really thinking about why the teacher has made those choices, and they're not necessarily even hearing the narration. So I've worked with a couple of teachers where we've looked at this and said, well, let's just get the students to pens down and just listen. And that in itself has helped, because the students are really concentrating, and they're almost liberated from not having to do this thing of writing it down. They can do that later. So that's the start. The next thing is to sort of make sure that when you've done something, that the students have understood the reason. And so checking for understanding peppers the process. So sometimes teachers fall into this trap of saying, so does everyone understand? So I've got that first sentence. Do you see what I've done? Yeah, everyone okay? And they do that everyone okay thing, which is one of the pitfalls of checking for understanding, where you think you've got an affirmative response, but really you just heard the student say, yeah, I'm fine. Now, what works better is to say, right, so Michael, what do you think I've done there? Why have I selected that first phrase? And checking that somebody knows, and maybe checking someone else knows. And what have I done next? Can you see why I moved on to that next phrase? Joanna, what effect does that have? And checking by getting the students to talk through it for you. Now that obviously takes longer, but what you're doing then is you're being much more successful in getting the students to show you they've understood. So it's much more piece by piece. Then you might even do this. Okay, everybody, have a go yourself now. So write your own first sentence. What would yours be? And they then practice that exact thing that you've just done. It's much smaller. So modelling is much more step by step, especially for students who are new to something. And I think a good analogy is like learning a dance. Now, obviously you want to see what a dance looks like. I'm going to learn this dance. I want to see the dance, because otherwise I don't know what the steps contribute to. So I get a feel for the dance. Okay, you go, wow, okay, I'm going to learn that. And that could be overwhelming. Now, watching the dance teacher do it over and over doesn't tell you how to do it. In fact, it can just be even more overwhelming. You think, gosh, I can see what they're doing, but even just getting the feel for the very first thing. So you need to break it down into tiny things. So the first step is, boom, boom, boom. Right, can I just even do that? Can I even do step one? Well, I might need to practice step one. And now let's have a look at step two on its own. So step two is this, right? And you practice step two. Then we might just do, can we do one and two? One and then two. So and then you get used to that. And then right now I'll do the third and the fourth steps. 3 and 4, 3 and 4. And now do 1, 2, 3, 4. And you build it up. Now that analogy obviously applies to a physical thing. But if it's something to do with, say, a maths problem, or a piece of writing. I think the same thing applies. Breaking it down, checking that they can do that, doing another thing, checking they can do that, then building it up. And sometimes it's useful to model from the middle. So, here's a paragraph. What might be the best place to go next? So we're sort of doing that middle section or the conclusion. Here's a sort of nearly finished piece of writing. What might a conclusion be? Let's read it. What might the writer need to say to sort of wrap this up? And modelling just the ending. And sometimes students don't get to that bit. The teacher models everything, and they always have to start from the beginning, and so their endings and so on aren't practiced with that same level of scaffolding. So that's the thing. It's the other analogy I use in the blog I wrote about this is about passing the baton. You're trying to hand over the ability to do something to somebody else. Now, if you look closely when people are passing a baton, there's a moment when they're both holding it at the same time. They're not just flinging it into the other person's hand. It doesn't work that way. There's a holding together. And there's a bit of a cliche kind of rhythm to modelling, which is I do, we do, you do. And people sort of trot that out. But that we do really is the heart of it. It takes time. It means we do it together. I'm helping you construct a sentence. I'm helping you do this maths problem. We're doing it together. And it's only when we are successfully interacting and passing to and fro that I can get a sense that you're kind of ready to go off on your own now as a teacher. So that we do part isn't some sort of quick thing. It's the heart of it. So there we go. I mean, that's what modelling needs to look like. And if you're struggling with it, if you think you're doing the modelling and the students aren't still succeeding, try to think what you could do about it. Is it a case of breaking it down into smaller steps? Is it a case of going to and fro a little bit more on the steps where you get them to practice each step in between? Is it about practicing further down the line rather than always from the start? And try these things out and then see if that transfers better. So there we go. That's some suggestions about how to improve your modelling. And I know a lot of people are working hard on this, so good luck with it.